Good evening, Brown community, and everyone else tuning in tonight from wherever in the world you may be. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the fourth in our series of Brown Fashion Week talks, which are being broadcast live from the campus of Brown University here in historic Providence, Rhode Island. I'm Sasha Pinto, the president of Fashion at Brown, and tonight we are exceedingly honored to welcome the legendary Kenneth Cole to Brown Fashion Week. And as a special treat, Kenneth's daughter, Amanda, who we're proud to say is a 2012 Urban Studies graduate of our own beloved Brown, will be moderating the talk. But first, I am delighted to turn the Zoom mic over to FAB's Vice President, Emma Rosenkranz, who will tell us a little bit more about Amanda Cole to get us started. So Emma, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sasha, and good evening, everyone. Amanda Cole has worked as a human potential coach, a storyteller, social entrepreneur, and impact strategist, helping leaders and organizations harness purpose to drive sustainable change. Amanda is a founding partner at 𝐁𝐿𝐷, a financial services social enterprise whose mission is to create financial opportunity, inclusion, and equity. Previously, she worked to develop corporate social responsibility strategy at Kenneth Cole Productions. Amanda has co-founded several nonprofits and campaigns to build community, drive collaboration, and make sustainable impact in the mental health, AIDS, and youth civic engagement spaces, while serving on the board of several wonderful organizations, including Help USA, Young Professionals, A Better Life Foundation, and the Mental Health Coalition and Social Impact 360. We are so delighted and so honored to have Amanda moderating this event tonight. Thank you so much, and back to you, Sasha.
Thank you, Emma. And now it's my great honor to introduce Kenneth Cole, and my goodness, where do we start? In 1982, Kenneth Cole creatively launched his business out of the back of a 40-foot trailer truck, and today he's at the helm of $1 billion lifestyle brand. But of course, that's only part of the story. We also all know and love Kenneth Cole as a social activist and visionary who has built his company around the belief that business and philanthropy are interdependent. And for over 35 years, he has leveraged his passion and platform to make a meaningful impact in underserved communities. Back in 1987, in the very early days of AIDS, he joined the board of the American Foundation for AIDS Research, better known as AMFAR, and was appointed the chairman in 2004. And under his leadership, AMFAR contributed significantly to breakthroughs in AIDS research, treatment, and prevention. And in response to this extraordinary work, the United Nations General Assembly appointed him as a UN AIDS International Goodwill Ambassador in 2016 to help achieve the goal of ending AIDS as a public health crisis by 2030. But Kenneth Cole doesn't stop there. In 2010, after the devastating earthquake in Haiti, he responded by opening the Kenneth Cole Haiti Health Center in 𝐂𝐂𝐿 to provide healthcare to one of the most underserved areas in the Western Hemisphere, reaching over 1.5 million patients in need. And then in 2020, in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, Kenneth launched an initiative to address what is arguably an even larger pandemic, mental health. And he brought together the nation's mental health experts and organizations to form the Mental Health Coalition to change the dialogue and end the stigma surrounding the subject of mental health. And I have to add that everything I just mentioned really only touches the surface of the countless remarkable public health and civil liberty initiatives that Kenneth Cole has undertaken. So suffice it to say, if this were a live audience, I know you'd all be on your feet applauding by now. So won't you please join me in a virtual standing ovation to welcome our remarkable guests, Kenneth and Amanda Cole.
Before Amanda takes this, I just want to thank both of you. Emma, it was a terrific introduction of Amanda, and I'm sure she'll acknowledge as such. But if I need a press agent, I'm assuming I can find you, Sasha, someplace. But what you two have done, first of all, is extraordinary, and it's so difficult to get so much done today. But to have been able to pull together so many, focus on a very specific agenda and message that is truly uplifting and inspiring at a time when we all need it so badly, is a tribute. So thank you for what apparently you do all the time, which I don't know how the hell you do, and thank you for tonight.
Well, oh my goodness, you were too kind, and thank you for joining us. Let me just start by saying how incredibly generous is of you to be here at Brown Fashion Week. We really appreciate it. All right. Well, wonderful. And now that we're all here, I'd just like to let our audience know that if anyone has a question for Mr. Cole, please just write it in the chat box below, because Amanda will be checking it on air to try and ask as many questions as possible. So with that, we will leave you two to get started. So thank you again, and bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you so much, Emma and Sasha. And yes, we would love to take you on the road to sort of articulately, be able to share things about ourselves that I know that we can't say as well as you did. So happy International Women's Day, everybody. I wanted to first just call attention to that and to the fact that this is a fun fact, 75 million people employed in the fashion industry, and 80% of them are women. 80% of the 75 million people employed by the fashion industry are women. So therefore, fashion is really an incredible vehicle that is often actually the first step out of poverty for so many of these women. And, the global reach and the cultural influences that fashion has is just so profound. And even the smallest changes can have rippling effects. And today, the fashion industry launched Fashion Makes Change, which is an industry-wide initiative that delivers women's empowerment and climate action in tandem with some of the most incredible brands in the industry, including Kenneth Cole. And it's an opportunity for you to round up on your purchases, and then the proceeds go towards education for women. And it's the industry's largest effort to educate and empower women a really big way. So we wanted to call that out. And let's get into it. So the first most important story that I always encourage my dad to tell is the story of how the company was started. So, because I think it speaks to such a entrepreneurial spirit, to creativity and resourcefulness in a time that has odd parallels actually to the one we're in. So can you tell us the story of how?
I will. I will. Thank you, Amanda. One last thing too. I just realized I had written down and I don't want to overlook acknowledging Adrienne Morris. Apparently, it was the faculty advisor who has inspired so much of this as well. So thank you. So I, just to give you context of when I started the business and the circumstances surrounding it, because it is oddly similar to today in certain ways. It was 1982, 83. We were in the middle of a recession. And there was, we were on the verge of a pandemic, which would define itself in a few years that came to pass. So I had a little bit of money, and I knew that I had very little time. And most startup businesses then, like today, fail in the first 6 months, if not certainly within the first year, because people invariably underestimate the time it takes to have a return on that cash and the costs incurred in getting a business to that certain point. So I knew I needed to move quickly, and it wasn't Google in those days, the olden days. So I went with my own name because I couldn't take a chance of coming up with one and hoping and finding out a year from that point that it was not available and there were conflicts. And so, and one could usually get their own name registered. And I knew it would make my mother happy. So I set up Kenneth Cole Inc. And I ran to Italy knowing I had a better chance of getting credit from an Italian shoe factory that needed business than from an American bank that didn't. And I designed a cool line of lady shoes. I came back and I had to sell it. And I knew that essentially I had two choices in the shoe industry at the time. You could take a room at the Hilton Hotel, which was about 1,100 companies, and there was 30 some odd companies per floor, and the and the buyers would walk around door to door and they would express their interest. Not a very good way to define myself, plus not without cost. And then the other option was to take a big fancy showroom within a 2-block radius of the Hilton Hotel, which clearly I didn't have the time, the money, or the resources. So on a whim, I called a friend in the trucking business and I said, if I could figure out how to park one of your 40-foot trailers on the corner of 6th Avenue and 56th Street on December 2nd, that's fashion, it's shoe show week, right in front of one of the biggest fancy showroom buildings. Would you lend it to me? And he said, sure, jerk. I'm happy to lend it to you, but you can't park a bicycle in New York for 10 minutes, let alone a truck for 3 days. If I can figure out how to do it, will you lend it to me? If you can figure out how to do it, I'll help you decorate it. So I called the mayor's office with Mayor 𝐀𝐿 at the time. Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, how does one get permission to park 40-foot trailer on the corner of 6th Avenue and 56th Street? The answer is, sorry, son, they don't. As New York, we get permission only to circumstances if you are a utility company servicing our streets, 𝐀𝐿𝐿 or Con Ed, or if you're a production company shooting a full-length motion picture, because we were going through an I Love New York campaign then, and we probably still are today. So I said, thank you, Mr. Mayor, hung up the phone. Wasn't actually the mayor, but, and that afternoon went to a stationery store, changed the letterhead from Kenneth Cole Inc. to Kenneth Cole Productions Inc., filed for a permit the following morning for permission to shoot a full-length motion picture called The Birth of a Shoe Company. We opened for business 10 days later, and compliments to Mayor 𝐀𝐿, we had 2 policemen as our doormen, and we had a cameraman. Sometimes there was film in his camera, sometimes there wasn't. And we had stanchions and we had Klieg lights, and we saw every buyer in New York over the course of the next 2.5 days. And the more important they were, the longer we made them wait. And we sold 40,000 pair of shoes in the back of that truck. And I tell that story because, actually I didn't tell it for a while, and then I told it when we went public 10 or 15 years later, because it's the importance, I think it speaks to the importance of resourcefulness and problem solving, and that the best solution is rarely the most expensive, it's almost always the most creative. So that was how the business ensued, and the business grew quickly, and we did things in ways others wouldn't, and arguably couldn't, and maybe shouldn't. And it was about a year or 2 into that, actually 2 years into that, was when this pandemic was really overwhelming all of us in very profound ways, and it was this very dark cloud, and it was HIV. And nobody would talk about it. Nobody could talk about it, because if you did, you were presumed to be at risk, which meant you were either an intravenous drug user, you were Haitian, or you were gay, and none of which were socially acceptable in those times. Ronald Reagan, who was the president of the United States, didn't mention the word AIDS publicly till 40,000 people had already died. And so we launched a campaign. Annie Leibovitz photographed it, and we had some of the biggest models in the industry agreed to be part of it. And that spoke about the fact that nobody would speak about HIV. In fact, there was an anti-stigma message. And it changed me. And I look back at that moment in time. It changed me, it changed the man, it changed the brand, it changed the company in profound ways. And I realized that that if we could make what we did part of something bigger than what it was in the ordinary course, then we can inspire ourselves, our associates, the marketplace in ways we never could otherwise. And everything becomes profoundly more meaningful. And that I've been on that road. And I was, at Amphar, we, I believe, had a very big impact on millions of people's lives. I think millions of people today are alive because of some of the research we did at Amphar. And it was creative, the way we funded the research, which is, could be maybe for another conversation we could all have. And I had stepped away from it about 2 years ago for a myriad of reasons. And then there was all these mental health conversations, and people had said, 1 in 200 people today still live with HIV, which is about 37 million people in the world, which is a lot of people. But 1 in 4 people live with mental health conditions, according to WHO. and 2/3 of whom do it in the shadows. And the stigma arguably surrounding mental health conditions is what it was with HIV 20 years ago. So is there any way you would consider kind of bringing resources in your company to this crusade? So I initially, I don't want to spend the whole time talking about this, but
especially the work with mental health, we want to make sure to really not skim over and go into in depth. Okay. But this is a crowd of people who have a lot of fashion questions. So I want to get to the heart of some of the fashion. So, well, to the point that you just, shared, is that you birthed the company and then really quickly found its social conscience, and you have managed to grow that social conscious and grow the business at the same time. And you've now been in business for close to 40 years. And not many people can say that. So what would you say?
I was 7 years old when I started.
What do you attribute your success to? Can you give some big picture thoughts, that some tweetable thoughts that enabled you to get here?
So I don't know if they're tweetable, but the business, what I love about the fashion business is that it's very interpretive, it's very personal, and it changes every day. And fashion, by definition, what's fashionable to you may not be to me. What's fashionable to you today may not be tomorrow. So, it's a very dynamic business that moves so quickly, and you invariably find yourself years later sleepless and not sure how you got from point A to point B. But it's very invigorating. And every day you're only as good as what you have to offer at that moment in time. So I've looked to figure out how to shortcut that a little bit, and how to build aspects of the business that are reasonably reliable. And years ago, I believe that point of difference between me and the 1,100 other shoe companies that were at the Hilton Hotel that day was my brand. And my brand was everything. And I had to make it have a very succinct and meaningful point of difference. And a brand is only a brand to the degree that it delivers on that point, on that message consistently in every classification, in every geography. But also what's changed so significantly over the years is that today everyone is their own brand. And I believe that most of you guys, you wake up in the morning and you curate your own brand on your social feed, on your Instagram, on your TikTok, on your Twitter. And then not only do you curate the content, but you curate your audience, and you decide who's going to have access to your brand. Who do you let in? Who do you not let in? So now my role is different. Now I have to hope that you'll allow me to be part of your brand rather than kind of entice you to want to define yourself by mine. I'm going to pause in case that you can go somewhere else. But we don't sleep a lot, and I love what we do, and every day, what I do is I essentially put myself in the proverbial shoes of the person with whom I want to connect, and in the hope that they'll then want to put themselves in mine, pun intended. But that's a big part of what the journey is, and because and to try to just relate to people, to your audience, and it's so fast moving, but it's extraordinarily invigorating.
And I mean, the way that the world has changed in your 30 to 40 years in business is profound. I mean, the way that the world, when I started working with you, we had a full advertising department, and we hadn't even opened, I think there was like not even a Twitter account. One of my first projects as an intern when I was in college was researching what other brands were doing with Twitter. So how do you forecast, understand the changes that are happening in the world and the way that they are currently, or could affect your business in the near future? So change and a business strategy.
You know, a metaphor that I often use in business is that if we all agree, for example, that we want to be in Los Angeles next Sunday, then let's make sure we know what Los Angeles looks like so when we get there. And at the same time, let's agree we better be in St. Louis by Wednesday and Denver by Thursday, not Providence and not Chicago and not Dallas and not Miami. So, and what is the path to achieve that? So, you know, we have a very clear sense of what makes the brand, gives the brand a reason to exist, and what is the inherent needs of the marketplace. And I do believe that the key is to always know the competitive universe. And people are stifled by the global realities today of the business, because everybody has access. Everybody anywhere is a competitor, because everybody anywhere has access to the same customers that I have access to through the internet, and which has changed, it dynamically changed the business, as everybody knows. So, but at the same time, so as a consumer, you have access to all product everywhere. And as a company, I've got access to all consumers everywhere. So I look at it kind of on the other side. And a brand today, if it's viable anywhere, it's viable everywhere, because of the global realities of the business today. So, so the key sometimes is to be out into the world and have a sense of what's there, and the hope that you can see what isn't. And that's sometimes the hardest thing to see. And then you also, I do believe, need a reason to exist. So everybody's closets everywhere, I've come to believe, are full. And so you've got to motivate people to make room in their already crowded closets for what it is that you have to offer from one season to the next. And that's the challenge, and it's a good one.
Well, and speaking of change, however much, competitive analysis and even forecasting, about new trends that you've done, it's very hard to predict the way the pandemic would have affected our realities. So this week marks 1 year, right, since the COVID pandemic changed the way we live and work in every way. So the fashion industry in particular was definitely hit incredibly hard, especially with retail. What advice do you have for a Zoom room full of students who are interested in fashion in a world where a pandemic is a reality?
I think that everybody's lives are in upheaval at this moment in time. Everybody's trying to figure out what is life in the PC world, which we refer to it, the post-COVID world, kind of look like. And I do believe that the world will never again be the way it was. We have to first accept that. And the world will never again be the way it is. And this is the new normal. But what we need to focus on is what is going to be the next normal. And where is the opportunity to, and what is Los Angeles? What is it going to look like? And how do we ultimately bring value to people's lives, and what's our reason to exist? And I do believe that there is a lot of opportunity in adversity. And over the years, our business has always done well in difficult times, because people in good times, people just want to do what they're doing and do more of it. It's only when things are difficult they want to reimagine, reconfigure, reconstruct that which they've taken for granted. And I think this is a time when resourcefulness and resilience and creativity come to bear. And that's something that is inherent in the fashion business by nature. So I do think the fashion industry goes on. The fashion industry not only survives, but thrives. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to figure that out. And I do think that today we're kind of in a more of a feel good rather than a look good phase, and it's from an inspirational point of view. And I think our value equation has changed a lot, and I think that that can manifest itself in how we introduce ourselves to the marketplace.
So bringing purpose into your business model, as we've touched on, has been a real differentiator for you, especially for the brand over the years. And today it's in so many ways like a requirement that brands are aware of the way, the social issues that matter to them and to their customers, and that they are also aware of the impact that they have on the world. And today you can sniff out like a lack of authenticity really, really easily. You can't just tack on a cause to a brand. So what prompted you to really feel like you needed to bring that purpose into business? Especially when you did so in a way where you used your marketing platform for something which, you were one of the first brands that did what we call today cause-related marketing, which hopefully will actually become a term of the past. Because as you say, to the degree it's marketing, it sort of undermines actually the real impact of what you're doing. It has to be authentic, it has to be real. So why did you feel it was so important to bring that into your business? And not just into your marketing platform, but also into your business, and especially in ways that, especially using your brand to talk about issues that were not only sort of on the fringe or risky or stigmatized, but actually like statistically very unpopular for the majority of people in the US, such as women's right to choose, same-sex marriage at the time.
So, over the years, I've struggled a little bit with what I do. First of all, I don't think anybody can be successful at anything today unless they give so much of themselves. They bring so much of themselves to it, and not just 40 hours a week and then home I don't think does it in any career. And I think you have to bring so much to something, and then at the end of the day, if absent of it being meaningful, other than just a paycheck at the end of the week, it's very hard to do that, and it's very hard to build that joint commitment and devotion within an organization, I believe. And also what I do is very fleeting. Hemlines and heel heights and this fabric or that fabric and this silhouette opposed to that silhouette. It's here today, it's literally gone tomorrow. So how do I make it meaningful? And I do believe that, and I've often said that what you stand for is in fact more meaningful than what you stand in, and to be aware is more important than what you wear. And I believed it then, I believe it even more now. And in the difference before, and you've actually taught me a lot of this, Amanda, too, over the years. In the past, it was just about doing social impact work. It was just doing philanthropy at the time. Today it's social impact work, and it isn't enough that you're doing it. You have to be able to articulate that impact, and it has to be real. So because people will see right through it otherwise. So in many ways, you're really held accountable, which I think is a really good thing. And I think that how do you and how do you do that? And at the same time, how do you do that in the spirit of everything else you do? And that's where it's hard. I've tried to intersect. Personally, I was committed to business. I wanted a career. We all do. And I also wanted to serve the community in some ways that we don't all necessarily do that, but many of us do. And I also, was wanted to somehow stay close to my family. So in an optimal scenario, I came to realize if I could somehow do what I do with members of my family, and at the same time make social impact part of the business in the ordinary course, then 1 + 1 will equal much more than 2, maybe even 11. And that doesn't and hasn't changed.
And something that you actually, so my dad said since, since the late 90s that I remember, that business and fashion, that community is the proverbial hand that feeds business. And that all businesses will get there, whether their hearts get them there or their balance sheets do. And I think we're seeing, and hopefully it's the former instead of the latter. And I think we're seeing this moment where it is really becoming almost a business imperative to do your best. So I want to talk about what this was like for you to adjust to a world where it was really important to always, of course, use your brand's platform to talk about important things and make a real difference, to reconciling how that, what that looked like when your company was trying to address issues such as the environment or diversity and inclusion or mental health. Because I know that a not fear, maybe not worry, but a concern, a light fear, was that, well, we could never, when we would talk about like what it meant to, when we were really looking at operationalizing sustainability into the supply chain and into everything, into the culture at Kenneth Cole. I know a concern you had was, we will never, to be a really sustainable company, we should shut our doors. We'll never be sort of the most green. There'll always be this ability to poke holes in what we're doing. And to this, in the same vein, there'll always be a way to be more diverse, more equitable, more inclusive. And two, with mental health, there's constantly a higher bar to meet when it comes to how to take care of your employees. So what was this shift in understanding that it's more about the journey versus the journey of the impact versus being able to stake a claim to something?
Well, in business, you've got a myriad of stakeholders and masters that you need to serve. At the end of the day, and profitability is one of them. Absent of that, you can't pay your rent, you can't pay your meet the payroll, and you can't stay in business. So, the three filters, our three corporate filters today, anyway, specifically, is agility, relevance, and profitability. And I think that. And that's evolves and that changes, and then if you're speaking to a global audience, or then what's relevant here isn't necessarily relevant there, and but I do find that the social platform becomes a common denominator in many ways, because fashion is so transient, and just seasonalities are different, and obviously north of the equator and south of the equator seasons are different, and what you can bring to market and when, and how things fit some people versus other people. It's a very hard business. So sustainability is a very hard bar, and so because to become a fully sustainable, to have a building, have a footprint that is in fact carbon neutral and does everything that it's supposed to do, almost becomes cost prohibitive today, although it's becoming much more affordable today than before. So the goal is to go as far as you can, to the degree you can, and the circumstances you can, and then as time goes along, maybe you're able to go further. But I've always tried to, in Haiti, we wanted to, this population was devastated. They were the poorest, most underserved population in this hemisphere before the earthquake, which was so overwhelmingly devastating and displaced several million people and took upwards of 500,000 lives. So, and now that comes. So our goal was, how do we impact the most people with the limited resources? And because whatever you have, it's limited in the scope of the reality of the heart-wrenching reality of what you see when you go down there. So we settled on funding a healthcare center which had the ability to serve this community, which did not have the, which could provide not just HIV but malaria and cholera tests and treatments, and so and that's what we try to do, and I try to do it in business, and I try to do it in life, which want to make a meaningful impact to people that's hopefully sustainable.
So we are getting a lot of fashion questions in the chat right now.
We can do that.
And this is one that I have always been curious about since I was young. And I remember looking at all the shoes and sneakers in your closet, and that some of them would, and I remember sometimes even today, you'll go and you'll pull a pair out because it becomes inspiration for what you're working on now. So the question is, how do styles coming back through the years? Fashion history repeats itself, fashion repeats itself. Can you speak to any of like any core styles or trends that you've seen come back, and how you keep your eye open for those trends?
So, well, I think today things come back, but they rarely ever come back the way they were. So a lot of silhouettes and shapes and looks that we loved over the years, and we don't want to get rid of them, so we keep them in the closet, and maybe we wear them again, maybe we don't. But at the end of the day, I mean, technology today has changed the apparel and the footwear business, because you can infuse all these qualities into a garment or into a shoe construction to the sole or otherwise, and it makes the experience unequivocally preferable. And today, especially post-COVID, I don't think people are not going back to be wearing less than comfortable shoes and clothes. And I mean, somebody asked me to describe 2023 words, and I said blood, sweatpants, and tears. But I do think that we went through a lot, but we're not giving up that which has, so fast anyway. I think people are going to want to be comfortable, and how do you allow them now how do you infuse that into clothes that and accessories that look right in the workplace, and that are comfortable and go when you go, breathe when you breathe, temperature controls, and all these other qualities. So our intention now is to infuse technology into every product we make, build a more classic wardrobe that is somewhat less, that is less seasonal and but yet modern and contemporary, and at the same time with elements of functionality that you couldn't do in the past. Which I believe is a reason that give me a reason to make room for you in my closet, because I don't have any. So, and the answer is neither do I. So that's our goal, and that's what we try to do. One other thing too is one of our missions is to focus on improving the planet and the lives and the physical and mental health of its inhabitants. So that is kind of our bigger agenda now in post-COVID. And I think we're all recognizing how fragile our lives are, how fragile the planet is and our lives in it, and our physical and as well as our mental health.
We just got a question perfectly timed in that asked by Kim. If you were to look into the future, what CSR, corporate social responsibility topic, do you think will be of the most importance to the fashion industry? I have an answer. What would your answer?
You know, actually, what I should do is, what
I
I would,
think
I
we have
would
the
probably,
same answer.
I would probably have answered what I just said before too.
Yeah.
I do think, this sustainability, I think we're all realizing how fragile everything is today. And I do think that the well-being of the planet and the mental and physical health of its inhabitants is critical. And I more than ever, and post-pandemic, I think we're all understanding that. And I think social justice is paramount. And it's something we have always stood for and always will. But our focus short term is going to be on what I had just said. But thank you for that question.
Yeah.
But
well, but and to that, because I think you're about to ask me some questions that are on this topic. But I do think that I love the way that you phrase that well-being, right? So there's your health, like what is your health? And you can't really just take, like, sustainability is about wellness, is about full picture health. And you can't just take your environmental footprint, but ignore the needs and then the well-being of the people, who are powering your business. So I think that, in the last 10 years, even, business has become so much more humanized, and your employees are the biggest resource we have. And, if any company is to be successful in their corporate social responsibility, they have to take care of their people, but B, your employees need to buy in. They need to get it, and make it. It needs to be part of their work, not just something that they check off on once a quarter. So that's what I would say to that question, Kim. That well-being and mental health, because mental health is this frontier that is so stigmatized, such a core critical piece of your physical health. And it's invisible. And I think that we're making a lot of progress culturally and socially to change the way we understand and engage with our mental health, and in the way that the business community is bringing compassion and understanding to our mental health as well. So that's my answer there. I have a few more cool questions. Sudeshna says, could you talk a little bit about the approach adopted to align the organization's internal culture and policy with the company's positioning on social issues? So that's a great question. So I could speak to what, our establishing our corporate social responsibility task force, and then the way we socialized mental health internally in the company for about 2 years before we launched a campaign externally. And same with, with the environment, we wouldn't market it in any of our products until we really looked at our footprint of our building and of our supply chain. But I was going to ask you, what do you, how would you, so back in the day, without giving away how back, when you didn't always have a culture, you always knew what your social conscious was, you wanted to use the brand to address stigma, to talk about what others weren't talking about in a way they couldn't. But you didn't impose it upon your employees. It was something you did. Could you speak about when you took that first step into welcoming your employees into this impact journey with you?
Yeah, I'll do that. And then what I want to do is wind up where we are, in the heels of DE&I and Black Lives Matter. But so years ago, I started doing my HIV work, and a lot of people came to work at Kenneth Cole because of that, because we're very public. I was very public about what I thought was important. And then at a certain point, I had a group of associates came to me and said, you know, we don't like that. We love that you do all the work that you do, but we don't love that you don't make it available to us. And I said, you know what? I didn't think I had the right to impose my personal social agenda on my associates. I didn't think I had the right to do it. And it's something that's very personal. And but if you feel that way, then I actually had a program. I had gone to Emory University and we set up a program there, a fellowship on community building and social change. And one of the first graduates came on board to our company and helped set up this kind of an effect. We call it the community outreach. And the goal was we were going to put in place all these programs, but we don't take attendance, and you're not going to do this to get credit. You're not going to do this to get points from me and a pat on the back. You're going to do it because at the end of the day, you're going to realize that you will be the biggest beneficiary of doing service. And I learned that a long time ago. And that usually the provider of that service takes away more even than the recipient. So so we put in place these various programs. We had a mentorship program when we mentored at a school on the west side of elementary and preschool and first grade, and we stayed with those kids through elementary school. And you know, you had a commitment if you're going to mentor a child. It was a program that was run by my mother-in-law at the time, Matilda Cuomo. And if you are going to commit, it's a real commitment, and you can't leave this abandon this child. Very often these children have had to deal with that in the ordinary course. So it was but you're going to do it for you when you're going to do it for that child. You're not going to get extra points here. And that's what we did over the years. So we put in place all these various programs, and we allowed the associates to do it. Then at a certain point in the company, we opened up the tent and we started making some of what we did available to other stakeholders of the brand and clients. And at about 1990, there was this pervasive problem in New York that nobody was talking about. It was called homelessness. Now, in the mid 80s to 90s, homelessness was not always a social problem here in this country. It actually became one in the late 70s, 80s during the Reagan Bush years, when they withdrew a lot of the social safety net, and then you had all this population that was totally unserved. And politicians didn't support them because they didn't vote. Businesses didn't support them because they didn't consume. So we had a business dilemma at the time because in the month of February, we had already gotten rid of all of our fall, winter boots and shoes. And we transitioned to summer. It's what people did because much of the country, it's starting to get warm in February, but you still want to be out every winter. So, but the problem is it's still 20 degrees in New York in the month of February, as everybody knows. So we ran an ad with a picture of a homeless person, and we said, unfortunately, too many people would love to be in your shoes. Bring in a pair that you don't wear for somebody that will, and we'll give you a discount on a new pair. So we created a call to action, motivating people to do what they actually would feel good about doing, and inspiring them to ultimately consider maybe buying a pair of shoes early. But over the period of time, we collected several million pairs of shoes over the next 10, 15 so years. And it was a big part of the brand's DNA, and everybody took that agenda home with them, and I think appreciated it and helped message it and grow it. It eventually turned into the Haiti initiative, because that was the same right after the Haiti earthquake that we decided to focus the resources there.
So with only a few minutes left, and everyone, I have a bunch of questions here, but definitely keep them coming. We'll get to as many as we can. Definitely want to make sure that we talk about the Mental Health Coalition and the work that we're doing. I'm going to kick it over to you in a second, but just to reiterate a point we made about starting internally, making sure we're walking the walk, and then, we can talk the talk after. So we started we started 2 years before we launched Mental Health Coalition a year ago. Wow, this year flew by, huh? And for about 2 years, we worked to become a stigma-free workplace, because we also realized we didn't even know how to talk about this stuff at the dinner table in our family, let alone, you know, in a meeting. And it affects everyone, you know, it affects everyone. So we became a stigma-free workplace. We looked at our wellness program. We looked at some of our policies and our healthcare, et cetera, and access to mental health services. So we really, I would say that everyone who works at Kenneth Cole knows we cared about their mental health before we launched the Mental Health Coalition. I hope they feel that, because it's true. So 1 year ago, I think it was, or a little less than a year ago, May 15th, I want to say was the date, we launched the Mental Health Coalition. Can you speak some more to the progress that we've made, what we're up to now?
Yeah, we only have 5 minutes, Amanda. So, but I'll tell you real briefly, what we did is, the goal was to, people had asked if people initially at NAMI, actually, was the largest grassroots mental health service provider in the country. They asked if we would take on this project of looking to do a campaign to talk about stigma. And at the end of the day, I believe then, like I do now, that it's so much bigger than that. And you need a whole new narrative, a new vocabulary, and a new way. You need to essentially rebrand mental health. And I'm not a public health person, and I'm not a psychiatrist, and I'm not a physician, but or a clinician. But I'm in the perception business. It's just how I describe what we do, and I'm a good convener of resources and people. So essentially what we did is we brought together some very creative people, and including Pentagram, who offered to help us with some of the creative efforts, and to put forth this new vocabulary. And then we started bringing together, I knew it had to be bigger than NAMI. Today's 27 of the largest mental health service providers in the country have all joined the Mental Health Coalition. And we are totally aligned. And we've since been working closely with Facebook and Instagram, who have agreed to use our resource library, which, by the way, which was created by 𝐀𝐿 Cole, Amanda's sister, who's been a big driver in this process. And so if you go to, and the goal now is to ultimately, a new narrative, make it easier for people to kind of express themselves emotionally. It's much harder for men than it is women. And then at the same time, and ultimately marry needs to resources. So no matter where you are, within a very short period of time, we're making so much progress so quickly, we'll be able to propose resources available to you, geotag you wherever you are, and we're very excited about, again, all of the support we're getting from everywhere that we're getting, and everybody universally recognizes that that this is a very serious problem. We launched an initiative, actually, which was Katie's, to a large degree, 𝐀𝐿 Cole, which in May, which when we really went public with the coalition in a big way, which asks the single most asked question in every language in the world, almost every day of the week, and the one most rarely answered, which is, how are you really? So then we set up, and she set up a platform, howareyourreally.org, and which invites people to be vulnerable and to express themselves and discuss their struggles a little bit, and they'll find comfort in the support that they're invariably going to get, and empathy where they didn't think they'd find it. And that's the goal, is to make it easy to talk about it. And what we're doing on Facebook now, we have a series of platforms that we're launching. Some, they're out, but they're not really front and center yet. They will be shortly. Which is reality checks, which we hope you could figure out how to find it, and you can find it from my platform. I'm going to start talking about it a little bit. And then we have these one-to-ones, which will be these live conversations where you'll talk to somebody who you're comfortable talking to as it, and you'll inspire others people to want to do the same. and a mental health person comes on and contextualizes everything. So, so we're making massive progress on what I do believe will be maybe the biggest pandemic we've ever experienced, even much bigger than COVID is in and of itself. I do think is mental health. So, but we're making big progress, and Amanda has inspired me immensely throughout this journey. Katie did it her way, and Amanda has done it in so many ways. And I think I blame Brown for all of that. I blame her Brown education for her willingness and her ability to think creatively, imagine what could be, and challenge me and us to be better.
It's all Brown's fault.
Brown's
So I put in the chat, the Mental Health Coalition link and the howareyoureally.org link as well. So please, everyone, check it out. We would love to hear from you about how these platforms have impacted you. Any opportunity to collaborate, that is our MO. That's what we're here for. 1 + 1 = 11. So we are at 9 o'clock on the dot, but I want to give you a chance to leave us with any inspiring last words of wisdom, food for thought.
Also, by the way, if you want to continue the conversation, you could Instagram me or send me a note on Twitter, and I will try to respond to your questions. And I appreciate you allowing me to impose myself upon you at this late hour. And I hope we can continue. I hope I can continue to be of service and support to you, and as Amanda can as well, and as she is for me.
And with that,
So I'm Kenneth Cole Real. The brand is Kenneth Cole. So ask questions, share thoughts, inspire me. Let me inspire you. And we'll go much further. I do believe, as I say, as a group, our coalition, that I think together we can make a difference. But I also think only together can we really make a difference. So, and another adage is that alone you can go fast, but together you can go far.